Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to episode 8 of Lakers Cast. My name is Dylan Strawn from the YouTube channel Woodbrew, and I'm joined, as always, by Chris from Toolify
Hey, everybody.
and Justin from You Can Make That.
Hey guys.
Yeah, so this is a pre-recorded, you guys know. We recorded this just in advance because we knew that Justin and I were going to be at Makers Fair and we wouldn't be able to record, so that's just a heads up there. We don't have anything extra that we've been up to, so we're going to go ahead and skip that portion right now. And we're going to go into today's topic, which is broken up into two different questions from a viewer. We're going to go with the first question, and that is, what is your favorite tool and why? So, Justin, you want to take that?
My favorite tool is probably just your plain old circular saw, or skill saw, whatever you want to call it. I don't have a table saw in my shop right now because I just don't have the space. And when I was younger, my dad wouldn't let me have one. So I managed to make it do with what I had. And at the time, I had a big, bulky Craftsman skill saw, or circular saw, sorry. And then 2 years ago, I upgraded to one of the battery-powered Makita ones. It's a 7.25-inch Makita battery-powered circular saw, and I love it. It's that I do almost all of my cuts with that saw. There's almost no project that I don't do any cut with it. I just use one of those rails that clamp on with the two quick clamps on each side, and I use it as almost as like a track saw. But I love it because it's not loud. It's super powerful, but it doesn't feel powerful. Does that kind of make sense, right? Like when you have one of those, because it's a brushless motor compared to one of the ones that plug in when you turn on, like the old Craftsman one, when you plug it in and turn on, it kicks, yeah, and it feels intimidating. Compared to this one where it's super compact, it's super lightweight, and when you turn on, you almost don't even hear it. You only hear the blade whizzing. So that's probably my favorite tool. It's the one I use the most. So. But by far, I think that's my favorite tool in the shop. Dylan, what about you?
Yeah, so mine is very, very similar. Purchase probably 5-6 months ago, something like that. I bought the Makita track saw, and the track saw has been by far the best investment tool I've ever made for doing client work, doing this stuff full time. So it's definitely by far my favorite tool for efficiency reasons. If you do anything with plywood, it'll cut your time in half, if not even more than that. It'll instantly cut your time in half, and then as you get more comfortable with it, it'll reduce it even further. So yeah, that is quite the investment tool. It's I think I paid about $600, roughly $700 maybe with the tracks, but I've easily made my money back. And what's so great about it is that you can use it like a regular circular saw, and use it for all the traditional ways a circular saw is used. But then you can also put it on these tracks that are just extruded aluminum. They have this gripping rubber pad on the bottom. And so when you lay it down on something, there's no clamping involved or anything like that. You lay it in whatever angle or straight or whatever you need to do, piece of plywood, a piece of lumber, anything, and you can make a perfectly straight cut. So I use it for plywood. When I'm breaking down plywood, I actually use it as a finished cut. A lot of people will just break down the plywood to rough dimensions and then put it on their table saw. I'm actually more confident in my track saw than I am in the table saw that I have. So all my finished cuts are what the have to do is measure over to your length, make one mark on each side, line your track up, and cut it. It's super fast. Dust collection is really, really good on those if you want to use it. I will say this. I absolutely love the Makita saw. I love track saws. I fully despise and would not recommend you buying the Makita tracks themselves. So you can get the Makita track saw for a very reasonable price. I want to say it's like $250. Don't quote me on that, but we'll put links to it. So you can get the saw itself for, maybe it's more than that. Maybe it's $350. But you can get it for really cheap, comparably. and then go with something more along Festool lines of the tracks. The Festool tracks work with the Makita saw, and what's great about the Makita saw, and the reason I bought it, was that the Makita saw has a 2 1/8 or 2 1/4 inch depth of cut in their base model saw. And if you go with the Festool, you're going to have to spend a little bit more to get that depth of cut. And that was crucial for me because I do a lot of full dimension lumber, which is 2 inches thick. And so being able to put a straight edge on any piece of lumber without having to use a joiner, that's just unbelievable. So you can pretty much cut a joiner out of your shop more or less. If you get a track saw, you're still going to have, if you have a lot of twist in your board, you're not going to be able to get that out with a planer. But if you really just need a joiner to get a straight edge, like for tabletops and stuff like that, yeah, the track saw is the way to go. So that's my number in my shop that I really, really could not live without, for sure, without a doubt, could not live without. So,
and it's not
going, Chris.
Kind of hold on before we go on to Chris, if you don't mind. Going back to one of the last episodes we talked about, Chris, you were saying spending the money up front to get what you would like, and better in the long run. That is one thing I'm really annoyed with myself, is I was hasty and bought that circular saw on even at the time I had money to get the Makita track saw, and if it was up to me now, I would probably want to do it the opposite. I would get the track saw first, then get the circular saw to have, because it's always good to have a smaller circular saw to have, just to use whatever project. But because I don't have a table saw, it would just save me what Dylan was saying. It would just save me so much time having that track saw I'd be able to use.
Yeah, and it's one of those things though. Like, I don't think that if you don't do it professionally, or I'll say this, if you don't do it professionally, you don't need a table saw and a track saw. But if you are trying to do it professionally, the track saw is going to save you so much time that I promise you, after 1 or 2 projects, you're going to make your money back. Because I guarantee, even if you're making dining tables and not cabinets, you will cut your time in half. It's an amazing tool. I fully promote it. I love, like I said, the Makita saw itself. Stay away from the tracks. They're garbage.
What is it that you don't like? What is it that you don't like about the tracks, if you don't mind answering?
So it took me 4 shipments to get 1 straight track when I ordered 3. So it took a very long time for me to even get 3 good straight tracks in. And then I started seeing people online posting stuff about theirs where basically the track itself is not flat. And I didn't have that problem initially. But then also with my tracks, they had been dropped in shipment. There was a corner that had been broken in or like dented in, so I couldn't slide anything. But it was the first track that I had gotten that was actually straight, so I kept it. The rubber strip that runs on the bottom that's a 0 clearance, it was not put on properly. It could be replaced, but it was not put on properly. So there are sections that are too far inwards, so they don't even make contact with the blade. So if you go to line those up with a cut, you may be off a little bit, if that makes sense, because it's not a perfect 0 clearance.
Right.
Also, now after owning the tracks for 5 months, mine have magically become more or less a V shape. So right where the ridge is that the track saw actually runs on, there's two pieces. There's a edge piece that has a T slot in it, and then there's a one more or less bar that runs down the whole length, and that's in between those is where the track sits. And then on the opposite side of that is just a flat surface. Well, that flat surface is actually angled upwards, and that is what your saw references off of when you set it down on something. So what can end up happening is you can be pushing the saw down the track, and then it could actually rock. I hope this makes sense. Teeter-totter, because the track is more or less a V shape somehow or another that's happened. and that rocking can either cause a nasty burn, a not so square cut, a kickback. It can cause a lot of serious problems for you, and it's just something that when you're spending that amount of money, you shouldn't have to deal with. The Festool tracks are just slightly more money, like not much money at all. I think. How much do you have the track saw?
Yeah, I don't. I bought it a long time ago, and I know the prices have climbed a bit since then.
My tracks were $55. I think the Festools were like 65 or 70. I think.
Okay.
Depending on what size, depending on what size, it's like 80.
Sounds pretty good.
Inch.
Yeah, if you were gonna get
the 80-inch was like $100-something for the Makita.
Yeah, the prices
160
to climb exponentially as you increase the length of the track. That's what I have found.
Yeah,
but also I will say this: if you have a local store that actually carries the tracks, I would be less skeptical of buying them, because you could go and actually sort through them and find really good ones. Whereas I didn't have the luxury of that. I had to order them and then just deal with what I ended up getting. And Makita is done nothing to anybody, really. They've sent replacement tracks to a couple people, told a couple people, like, sorry. Yeah, I don't like that. I feel like if you're going to make a premium quality tool and back that as a premium quality tool, your basic function of the saw, ought to be professional, I guess. I don't know how to say that exactly, but that's unacceptable to have the track of the track saw not be straight or not be flat. Like
when
that's
you're paying that much for
base
a tool
of the saw. Yeah, I mean, if you want to use a circular saw in a clamp guide, go right ahead. That's the level. But when you're starting to spend $600 or more on a circular saw, you expect it to be flat. It's aluminum.
Yeah,
it can be flat. And I think, don't quote me on this, I think that the Festool ones are actually ground flat after being extruded. Don't quote me on that, but I think they have been ground flat in some way. I don't know if they're passed through like a drum sander of types or what.
Just on the edge? I don't know. That would be, I don't know. I think... Yeah,
I've heard
I'm
that.
not aware of
I have
that.
no idea. But mine are just, straight extruded. And for the 110-inch one that I have, yeah, it's 110 inches. That one was 1/4 of an inch bowed. That's a huge bow. That's huge.
Yeah, see, that was the nice thing about working at Woodcraft was if something was bowed or defective. If something was bowed or defective, one, we would see it before we put it on the shelf. But mainly, if a customer wanted it, usually they would do what you do. They would come in, they would open the box, see if it's bowed, or if it's defective, we send it right back, and we'll give them a new one. But that was nice, as they could exchange it for one, because if they bought it, it's just nice to have right then and there. I mean, obviously, if we didn't have the size, then we would just order it. But it's funny you say that. What was the length you said? Because there was one at my local Woodcraft that I'm pretty sure they said that they did not carry in store, just because it warps in shipping all the time. That's what I'm almost positive that's what they said to me one time. So whenever they have it ordered, they have it ordered.
Which is crazy. Why would it warp in shipping?
It's not like the actual thing warping. It's crushed.
That's what mine had to have done. Mine had to have warped sitting in my garage, which is unacceptable.
Yeah.
Most workshops are not climate controlled.
I don't know about that with the Festool ones. I'm saying warped as in like how some of the stuff was delivered to us honestly looked like they dropped it down like a full flight of stairs, and
that's the thing, that
the box.
The tracks came in literally a cardboard box that was like paper thin, like just one box. It was like the size of the thing, and the thing is 110 inches long.
I'm pretty sure that's the one we don't
do some damage with something that big.
For that reason,
yeah.
Chris, what's your favorite tool?
All right. I mean, track saw very near and dear to my heart because that's sort of the tool that started enabling me to do woodworking as I know it today, having been, we'll go back and listen to episode 1, I guess, where I was afraid of the table saw, and I got a track saw that started to give me the opportunity, the tool that I was comfortable with to make more complex projects. But my favorite tool is not the track saw. It is the router, the woodworking router. Why I like it? Because I mean, it's a bit like basically a single point thing that spins really fast and is able to cut stuff, and you can get so many different router bits for it, of course. But essentially, I really feel that although it would take like a substantial amount of effort, you technically can do almost anything with a router alone. You could make, you know, if you absolutely had to, even something like making a straight cut on an 8-foot sheet of plywood, like ripping an 8-foot sheet of plywood. Yes, it would be super annoying because you have to like take multiple passes and keep adjusting the depth of cut and all that. But you could rip a board using just a router, right? It hypothetically. And like, what's a CNC machine? It's a router.
It's exactly that. It's a router flipped upside down. Yeah.
Flipped upside down, computer guided, and it's able to cut shapes out. It's able to do inlay. It's able to plunge in the middle of a workpiece and create a cutout. Like, it basically has, at that point, it's working like a jigsaw. You can cut shapes out. Now, it's not like the safest tool. In fact, it's probably one of the really dangerous tools. Like, I'd say, if you don't know what you're doing with a router or like a router table, you know, if you feed the router table the wrong way, which isn't as intuitive as a table saw. On a table saw, it's pretty clear which way I hope it's clear. It's pretty clear which way you feed the piece in. I mean, a table saw, if you feed that the wrong way, that's a recipe for disaster. But a router table, you really, like, if it's your first time using that, it should be intimidating. I hope you are intimidated when you use a router table for the first time, because you really have to be careful and make sure you are feeding it in the correct direction, so that you don't have your workpiece catch and kick or pull your hand into the bit, whatever. The details, like when you're making a cut with the piece between the fence and the bit versus making a bearing guided routing operation, you have to switch the direction in which you're feeding there, because you end up on the other side of the router bit, the other side of the rotation. So if any of this is unclear to you, ask somebody that is experienced with the router, or go on YouTube and watch all the router safety videos, because like, that's important. Safety first. I have colleagues that tell me they're going to, like colleagues at work that tell me they're going to buy a woodworking router. And I'm like, okay, call me when you do, because I don't trust you they injure themselves doing less scary things that I don't want them to have bad experiences with the router. But anyway, I feel like I'm going on about this too much. Safety is important. We'll summarize that and move on. Yeah, just the sheer variety of router bits. You know, it's crazy. I can use a router as a planer, as a jointer. You know, you
I never thought about that.
do
Yeah, you
that
actually can use it
routing
for so
sled.
many things.
Yeah, I can use it like a drill. It would be pretty stupid, but I can get all the different diameter router bits and I can use it as a drill by plunging. If I get some, well, this is a stretch, but you can use it as a sander. Technically, if you're able to use it as a jointer and a planer, you can sort of like, if you have something really rough, you can like run a router bit over it, over and over and
Sure.
like flatten it, and it's sort of like sanding it. I know it's not the same thing, but that's why I say a router can kind of do everything, because provided that you really put the effort into it. You can do joinery with it. You can use it, for box joints, dovetails, dowel joints, mortise and tenon. I'm gonna stop there. I think you've had enough. I think you get the idea. I got a little too excited. So yeah, and
what would be our here? Let me segue into the next thing. If you were to give a suggestion for a child or a kid to start to get into woodworking, what would be the tools that you would suggest for him or her to start out with?
Yeah,
that you feel aren't too dangerous, but at the same time, you should have a basic knowledge of and aren't too young to start out with. Let's say the age is like 12, okay? Maybe a little younger, 10.
Yeah, so when I was like that age, I'm gonna use that as my reference point. The only power tool I had access to was a drill, battery powered drill. And for some people, like, I mean, that's really young. So I'm gonna leave it, you as a parent, if you are listening to this podcast, because I don't know, if you're a 10-year-old listening to this podcast, please let us know. That would make me so happy that people that young are listening. But I'm gonna go with the assumption that I don't know.
Do 10-year-olds know what podcasts are?
Well, yeah. I mean,
And when
if
I
you're a
was 10,
parent
listened to
and
those.
you're
Probably the first thing they delete on their new iPhones.
Exactly, podcast taking
Heck
up
is
space.
this?
Yeah.
Yeah, because the perspective of the question, and this came from NW Maker, or Northwest Maker, just to give them a shout out, was that they're asking with the context of what tool can they use with their kids that are in the age range of 4 to 12, and like some beginning projects that could be done. I'm very tempted to, I mean, so again, using myself as a point of reference at that age, 10 years old, that's what we're talking about now. I was using a miter box, which is like it's sort of like a bench hook, but with like a guide for a hand saw. So not to be confused with miter saw. A miter box is just like a guide for a hand saw, which lets you cut a piece square or on a miter. I had that to cut my pieces up, some glue, but that's not a tool, and a drill, a hammer if you're comfortable with that. But a drill, you can make some holes, screw in some screws, and they're relatively safe, but you still have to know what you're doing. They're safe in the sense that they're relatively safe in the sense that the speed at which, like the rotational speed of a drill, of a hand drill, is nowhere near something like a table saw or a router or a jigsaw.
Damage if it jumps and hits your finger.
Yeah,
But
yeah. Well, yeah.
that's like almost with anything.
I mean, it's still dangerous.
It's more of a bump and less of a
cut through.
But like, yeah, because if you touch as we know, if you touch a circular saw blade, the blade isn't even gonna like realize you're there. I don't have firsthand experience. I hope never to have that. But just judging by how easily it cuts through wood, I can form a reasonable guess that if I were to put my finger there, it would probably cut it off in a similar fashion. So that is not something we want to do ever.
That is true. Chris, I can relate to that. Yeah, my
this-
dad basically
take
had
this
me do
on.
the same thing when I was around that age. He had, I mean, he had a miter saw and everything, but I was allowed to use the drills, I think, by myself. That was it. Everything else he would use, right? He would cut the stuff with the miter saw, or he would hold, like, he would be there while I'm using it or something like that. But I really just used a handsaw, exactly what you said. I didn't ever use a miter box, but I just used a handsaw the whole time, and that's how I cut all my pieces. And then I started using that circular saw probably when I was 13, by myself. Like, he let me by myself without him being there. Same time, well, the funny thing is, I learned how to use a lathe before I learned how to use common sense power. And by common sense, I mean like your general power tools, right? You have your circular saw, you have your miter saw, and you have your drill. I learned how to use a lathe before I learned how to use my miter saw properly, which was completely backwards, and I don't suggest that, but it was just back exactly what you said. I used hand tools and a drill, and that's what got me by. Dylan, what about you?
Yeah, so starting at the 4-year-old range, I don't know that there's a lot of tools that would be appropriate for a 4-year-old other than, say, like a hammer and nail. Maybe start a nail if it used to hammering a nail. I'm just trying to think of
don't.
kids that I
Yeah.
know that are 4.
I
It just
can't
depends on
picture
the
that.
maturity level, I guess.
Yeah.
But
I'm just gonna say
But,
to the 4-year-olds,
I think that
please
there's a
don't
lot-
hit your hand with a
yeah.
hammer.
Yeah, that hurts.
That's it.
I feel like there's a lot that a 4-year-old could do to help his older siblings, though, since I'm assuming you have kids somewhere else in that 4 to 12 range, like sanding and like maybe using the hammer to, hammer in a nail, maybe not hammer in a nail, but use the hammer, get him involved or her involved. And then moving into the 6 to 8-year-old range, that's when I started using more power tools and tools in general. That's when hammering nails was sort of a fun thing to do. That was like, how many hits does it take to get the nail into the board? It was also the time that I started learning how to use a actual power drill. But again, there's not a whole lot of projects. I think in that range of kids, maybe 4 to 8, there's not a lot of projects necessarily they could do on their own, obviously, but there's a lot of skills they could learn that you could help them during a project. So maybe you'll make a birdhouse. You obviously do the cutting with the miter saw or something like that. Maybe they drill a hole and drive in a screw. Maybe they help paint it if they're younger. Maybe they help sand it, something along those lines. And then when you get into like the 10 to 12-year-old range, I think is when it's more appropriate, at least from my experience, to start introducing them more into being able to know how to use a tool. Because it's one thing to use a tool one time while someone's in front of you. It's another thing to actually understand the tool and know how to use it when someone isn't directly there overseeing every part of it. Because there's a big difference there, and there's a lot of safety issues there. If you've just seen someone use a miter saw, it does not mean you use a miter saw. I did a lot of repetitious things with my dad tools before I ever even felt comfortable, and surely before he felt comfortable to let me use a tool alone.
Yeah.
Or build something. But I think that getting them into something like a lathe would be awesome, because if you set the lathe up, that is the dangerous part in my mind. Unless you're turning something large, maybe if you have like some small pieces that could be like a handle or a pin or something, where you can set everything up and let them get into turning, even at the earlier ages, 8, 9, and then up to 12. Maybe at 12 they've learned enough to start actually doing stuff on their own, and fully turning things from start to finish. But I don't know that there's a lot of full projects for that earlier age. 10 to 12, though, I mean, I would feel comfortable saying let a 10 to 12-year-old use a miter saw.
One thing I did with my
maybe
dad
not
when I was
fully by
really
themselves. I mean, all this is supervised, but maybe build an Adirondack chair for the backyard
yeah.
with your kid for Mother's Day or something. You know, I think it's all about you getting out there as a parent and really overseeing the whole process, but letting them be a major part of it, so that they're learning from watching you, and also like genuinely being. It's one thing to have like a craft. It's another thing to like actually have a kid who's wanting to run around and watch you and help you build. It can be dangerous, I think, when you like say, let's, build this, and we're all going to be here and build this, and like, you know what I mean? I think it's a much better approach to let them like walk in and be interested, and then allow them to help you when appropriate.
Yeah, I was going to say exposure at a young age would be the best thing. I mean, when I was little, my dad and I was probably like 7, 8. We built a little like art easel to paint on. He did all the cutting, but he definitely helped me like hammer and stuff like that. But being able to be exposed at that young of age, like learning how to screw in a little hinge or something like that, that at the time I had no idea what that was, but looking back on it now, it was just teaching me little small basic skills, and then him letting me paint the project. I feel like that would be like, everyone's like, oh, do a birdhouse or something like that. But I always feel building something practical besides like a birdhouse that then you can let the kid finish in his own way shows that he had or she had a sense of could make the kid feel like he definitely had a huge part in that project. A chair, I never thought about that.
Also,
I didn't. Pretty cool, but
I forgot to mention this is a major thing. One of the things that I really got into, even as early as 8, was electronics, and electronics can be very safe as long as you're not dealing with wall power. I mean, like small 12 volts, 9 volts, AA batteries sort of electronics. Yeah. There are some really, really great kits that I grew up with. And they're little electronic kits that you can build like a little solar powered car, or you can put together circuits. Man, I can't remember what this is called, but I will find this and put this in the show notes.
I got it when I was in New York. I know what you mean. It was like, they almost looked like little plastic things, but they had metal clips on each end. Yeah, and they snapped together, and you could do like a little fan or a little.
They're like buttons.
Speaker. Yeah, I have them. I think I have it under my bed still somewhere.
I had this massive set, but it was expensive. I remember like it was like a full crisp $100 or something. Yeah. But it had a booklet of probably over 100 projects to do, and they're really interesting things that were just follow directions and very simple and laid out, and would actually teach you like what it is you're doing. I mean, things that are cool as like a motion detected alarm thing. And then from that, I started making my own circuits just with, from learning individually, going through the book. I would my own really cool circuits. And maybe instead of an alarm going off, it blew a fan, or it signaled a MP3 player to start playing, or like really cool things you could do with it at a very early age that was very safe. And electronics are what led me into actually making things more along the building side of woodworking and stuff like that, because I needed enclosures for my electronics. So electronics are huge. You can really get a kid very excited over electronics. Just getting a little fan motor and some AA batteries and some alligator clips will blow my mind away by showing him that these little batteries make a fan spin. Because nowadays with phones and stuff being as tiny as they are, kids think it's magic. I think, they don't understand that there's like actual things happening in there that are technology that are explainable. So
that always amazes me, right? When I'll be downtown and I'll see a kid who's probably like, I don't know, still has a pacifier in its mouth, and it can work an iPhone perfectly fine, but it can't walk and it can't talk. Like I've seen that. I waited at a what is it? Waited. I waited at a restaurant for a few years, and that would drive me nuts. Like the parents would just hand the phone to the kid, shut him up, and the kid could work the phone perfectly fine, but yet it couldn't talk, and it would crawl. And I'm like, are you serious? Like, I'm
That's
kind of
funny.
impressed. I'm not even mad. I'm more impressed. Like the fact that kid could do that. I gotta find that kid though.
My
That
nephew,
kid was so fun to play with.
loves the iPad, but we have a lot of like very educational games on it. So like he's 2 years old. No, I don't know. I think he just turned 2.
Wow.
But he can say his ABCs. He can count to 20. He can spell his name and all this stuff. And then most of it's attributed. He knows all his shapes, colors, everything.
That's really
All
impressive.
that's mostly attributed to his iPad.
Yeah.
Because that's why he wants to be on it all day, and all the apps are like telling him letters and singing songs and alphabets and colors and active games like that. And he loves that thing. And like I said, he's incredibly intelligent. I think not mostly because of that, because obviously his parents work a lot with him too, aside from that. But I will say that has helped a lot. It's pretty cool.
So there you
I
go.
don't think I learned my
Technology
ABCs
isn't so bad.
until I was like first grade.
Technology is evil. No. No, that's
Literally, he can
fine.
say
That's
his
reasonable.
entire ABCs. And he's 2 years
I was
old.
gonna say that's reasonable. And if anything, that's really impressive. I'm talking more about like I've been eating lunch downtown, and there's these kids where this dad will be walking, doing something on his phone, and these 2 kids will be trailing behind him, holding an iPad, not doing educational games. Like you can see it. It's like Angry Birds or Clash of Clans or something like that. And I've literally had someone where I was sitting like in front of a restaurant, and it was like this sidewalk, and this dad walked by me, and this little kid walked and like clipped the side of my chair and like looked at me and then just kept walking. I'm like, dude, you're face down on an iPad. That's what irritates me when I see parents not being with their kids doing it. There's a time and place, and there's reasonable. Like I'm all for if it's teaching you exactly like what you said, the ABCs and everything, and being helpful, but moderation. I feel like it should definitely be in moderation.
All right, so I'm gonna get back to the tool discussion. And
off of that tangent,
I'm going to ask a question that I think would be fun to talk about. I mean, at least for myself, I can say I definitely made mistakes as I was learning the craft of woodworking and what to do and what not to do. So, open question, what do you consider to be like your a story of a bad injury, or I don't think we've had like bad injuries, but something like a closest call.
I've had too many.
Or
I also don't know if I want to say them because my parents listen to this podcast. So, Dylan or Chris, you want to start out? I gotta think of one.
Yeah, I can start out. I'm sort of putting you on the spot, but
well, one that I know offhand, no pun intended, is I drilled through my hand when I was probably, I don't know, maybe 14, maybe 13, something like that. At the time, we were big into airsoft guns, and we were modifying and making airsoft guns cool. And it was paintball guns. It was one of the two. And I was holding a plastic part, and I was drilling through it. I was holding the plastic part in my hand, and it kind of had an overhang, so it was overhanging my hand where I was drilling. I didn't realize that the plastic was hollow. So I basically went through the first layer and forced it straight through the second layer immediately, and it went into my hand and pretty much all the way out the other side almost. And that was an eye opener for sure. I've had kickback twice on a table saw.
How large was the hole you were drilling?
Once
on the plastic.
I'd say that hole's about,
Like diameter.
I don't know, a little over a quarter inch.
You're like, hold on, let me look at
Maybe.
my hand. Like, actually,
Yeah.
so you
know,
got
I
it
think
right
it's
between your thumb.
probably a
like,
little over
that's
a quarter
part
inch.
between
So
your
you,
thumb.
you tried to give yourself a piercing on your arm, basically, with a drill. Like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I was very lucky though because it hit me right in the fatty part in between the thumb and the index finger.
It's creepy you say
So
that.
just-
that
It's
sounds
creepy
so painful.
because when I was younger, I was obsessing over airsoft too, and I decided to make these airsoft vests, like fake Kevlar vests, right? Basically, they were layered magazines, but how they were layered was you didn't feel anything when you had them, but they would go up and over you, and they were duct taped, and they had really cool designs and everything. And me being stupid, one day I had an X-Acto knife, not a drill, but an X-Acto knife, and I was cutting, and I slipped, and I did exactly where you pointed. I went right through it, and I
Yeah.
was probably 12, and my parents didn't know that I had an X-Acto knife doing this, and I don't like when things go on through skin, and I got really queasy, but
My
I
worst
remember I ran to the
actual,
bathroom, just held my hand, just squeezing as tight as I could, just not wanting to see it the whole time.
I
my
What you
worst
do, Dylan,
actual
when you
injury
do?
was
I'm
also
very
with an
good about
X-Acto knife.
injuries. I injuries don't usually phase me that much. I'm pretty good about blood and everything, but with this one, so it's funny. One of my good friends was standing next to me, and as soon as it went in, we both just stopped and looked at each other, and I was like, "Dude, I think I'm gonna have to go to the hospital." That was like my first words. Was, "Dude, I think I'm
Dude.
gonna have to go to the hospital," and I pulled it out, and it had.
Ew, no.
It had like meat on
Stop.
the drill
Like
bit itself.
in the twist. Oh,
And I ran
no.
inside. And his mom. I ran to the sink holding it so I could get over the sink. His mom comes in there and she goes, "Oh, time to get out the alcohol." She got 100% like cleaning alcohol and poured it in my hand. I would
Oh, oof.
never. She tried to do that like at a future date, and I ran out the house. Like
That's like
that
worse
was
than
the
hydrogen
most
peroxide.
painful
Oh my
thing.
God.
That was
Jesus.
the worst thing I've ever had in my life, pain wise. Like it was
So
terrible.
I'm picturing right now the size of the hole is the size of like a straw. Is that about the right size?
Yeah.
Oh God.
And yeah, that was the whole drilling in my hand was not bad. The alcohol was terrible. It was the worst. I was screaming. Like I went from totally calm to like, oh, I just need to stop the bleeding to screaming. Like it was terrible.
Awesome.
Oh yeah. So and I've also had, I would say with an X-Acto knife, since y'all brought that up, I was in high school actually. I guess it was sophomore year. I was doing pole vault, and
How does pole vault
this
and
will add up
X-Acto
here in a
knife
second.
go together?
It'll add up here in a second. I was doing pole vault, and this is the reason why it sucks so bad. I had just qualified for like basically like a state, like a little, like I don't know what you call it. I guess it's a state meet, but a big event thing meet that I got to qualify for to go and compete in. And the night before I was going, I was trying to open up a iPods, and I had an X-Acto knife like cracking the seal, and it slipped off,
Oh.
and it cut. I can't remember if it was I think it was across my hand. I don't think it was my thumb, but it was across my hand.
Ooh.
Bad enough that I had to get stitches that night. And so I ended up having to compete with like 6 stitches
Oh,
across
you
my
gotta
hand.
grip a pole
So
with
it
that.
just like,
Jeez.
yeah. Luckily it was my bottom hand, so it didn't have a lot of pressure on it. But I just wrapped it up a whole bunch and went for it. But
Ouch.
yeah, I definitely have my X-Acto knife stories. Y'all go ahead, because I'm sure I think more while y'all talk.
Chris, what's your X-Acto knife story?
My X-Acto knife story was it's not quite as interesting as yours, but I was cutting paper.
Oh, you actually do have an X-Acto knife story.
Well, Yes.
I was joking with that. I think.
Oh no, I said it earlier. I said it earlier that was my worst actual injury. In this injury, I was cutting a sheet of paper because I hate cutting like shapes out paper with scissors. I always do it with an X-Acto knife because it's more precise and faster. So I was using like a metal ruler. No, it wasn't. I usually use a metal ruler, like the one you get from a carpenter square, like those.
Yeah, like a nice one.
Yeah, but this time I
Yeah.
was using a plastic ruler, and it was sloped on the sides. So I'm like, I'm cutting it, and it slipped, and it got my thumb, and yeah,
So was that your
pretty bad.
I've been thinking about this now that we're telling all these stories. What was the first injury that you had? Not like we can say creative injury, meaning not like slipped and fall on a brick wall or like something like that, but like actual, what was your first injury that somehow involved you building or making?
Probably hitting my thumb with a hammer or something like that. That's what I imagine. Must have been.
Dylan, do you have yours? Because I remember mine clearly now.
I've got a really great story for this. Well, I have many. I could go on for a long time with this because making things and
Okay, you have 2
skateboarding go hand
minutes.
to hand.
2 minutes.
So,
no.
but I'll go back even further. I may have talked about this. I tell people this story a lot because it cracks me up so much. But my best friend Luke, he had this giant fort. Y'all stop me if I've already said this. But he had a giant fort in his backyard that was like 14 feet tall.
Jesus, that's huge.
And he had this giant oak in front of it, and there's a limb at roughly the same height, a little above that. Well, we ended up making a swing to go on the limb, and we would jump off the 14-foot tall swing and swing, and then we could literally walk across the wall in midair of his carport, which is on the other side. So we were crazy. Anyway, so doing that with one person is awesome. You get up there, you jump off, but why would you not want to do it with 2 people? So I made this it was like the swing thing that we had extra laying around. So I go to tie a swing to the rope that we already had in the tree so that Luke could sit in the swing while I jumped and held onto the rope, right? So we could both go, right? So I tied this thing on there, and he's like, yo, are you sure that's gonna, and this is when we're really young, like really, really young, probably like 8. And he's like, I'll never forget, he's like, are you sure that that's gonna hold? He's like, it looks like it's gonna slide down. I'm like, no, man, I'm a Boy Scout. I got this. I know how to tie knots. Well, what I did is I stand a knot around a rope so that so if you put any pressure on it, it would just slide down the other rope. So he gets up there with me, and we jump off, and he's in the swing, and it just slides straight off the rope, and he hits the ground from like 14 feet on his butt, just straight to the ground.
Oh,
that is like our the epitome of our relationship. It was just like dumb stuff like that. And stories pertain to making things.
When I was about the same age, when I was about 8, I was with my grandpa, and I don't know why, but for quite a few years, I got in the whole styrofoam phase. If it was styrofoam, I would take it and make something out of it. I guess that kind of relates now to prop making, and looking back at it, that's kind of how I started. But it was styrofoam, spray paint, and powder paint. That was like my life for quite a few years. And I was outside, and I got these sheets of styrofoam. Not like it's almost like the floral type of styrofoam. It's like it's crunchy. It's not soft. It's like the type where you make like planets out of, right? Those ball planets. So it's like that, but as sheets. So my grandpa and I was outside. I had to be younger. I was probably like 7, 8. My parents did not let me cut like this because I wanted to cut the styrofoam long ways. So I took the scissors, and when you open the scissors all the way, and then you put your hand in between the scissors and you slice like that. So I saw my teachers do it before. So I was like, oh, I can do it. And my parents would have killed me. They would never let me do it. But my grandpa was home and they weren't. And he just kind of stared at me and was like, yeah, you do your thing. So I'm slicing and I'm going all the way through. And I get to the very end and I push really hard and it goes, there's probably about 4 inches left of the styrofoam and I go way quicker. And I slice down my pointer finger all the way through, like from tip to like palm all the way through. And I'm screaming. And of course, you know, what do typical grandpas do? You're fine. You're fine. Get up. You're fine. You're fine. Get up. And I'm screaming, and like my parents come home. They're like, "What the hell happened?" And he's like, "I don't know. He was cutting with scissors. There's blood all over the place." And then, yeah, that was my first injury. And then, of course, you know, I'm crying, sobbing my eyes out. But I had my finger glued. That was the first time I realized what super glue was. So they basically just pinched it and glued it all the way back. I never got stitches, which was weird, but it must not have been that deep. They just kind of pinched it and glued it all the way back together. But
Actually, now that I'm thinking about it some more, I think my first injury must have been a burn from a soldering iron because I was soldering at a pretty young age. So yeah, that's got to be what I did.
those hurt. I've had them drip on my. I usually always wear jeans when I solder because I tend to solder standing up with my helper hands because the lights, the pixels I solder are usually for the light show, so they're really long, and I'm doing it outside on like my workbench. So I'm usually standing up, and when it drips, it just drips onto the ground, and then you know you sweep it away because it doesn't stick to anything. But I was soldering on my kitchen table a few weeks ago, and I was wearing shorts, and it dripped, and it just went like on your thigh. And you don't realize it because you're like, "Oh, it's hot," and then you look down, and you're like, "Oh my, and it's staying you." And you're trying to, you go to take your hand, you wipe it off, and you realize your hand's wiping solder onto your hand, and then that doesn't come off. It just doesn't end. Solder and I are not friends. that's why I moved to
The worst.
with the built-in solder. So you just put it over, you heat it up, and it does it all for you. So I don't have to do it.
The worst thing ever is when you're wearing like tennis shoes with like a mesh top,
Oh,
like a lot of the Nikes are.
yeah.
And you're welding, and a piece falls on top.
Oh man, yeah. I've had
And
I've had a welding piece go down my shirt.
Through.
I can't relate.
Yeah. And it's there, and you're like, it's getting hot. It's getting hot. And it's like the matter of like getting your helmet off and getting your shoe off before it touches your foot.
It's getting hot.
It is the worst thing ever.
Yeah, I went to like a welding class sometime a few year-ish back now, I guess, must have been. Yeah, and first time welding and scraping stuff off, or like, no, knocking stuff off with the hammer, and I got that, what's it called? It had a name, the coating that forms, but part of that
slag.
Slag, yeah, part of that went down my shirt. That was not fun.
Oh, down your shirt.
Not fun. This is a really good conversation. I am enjoying it. It's funny.
Telling stories.
If you are listening to this on the subway, because I'm that person that'll listen to a podcast on public transit, and then I'll burst out laughing hysterically when somebody says something funny. Yeah, I mean, it's hysterical to like the people around me because like I'll start laughing and everyone will look at me and it's like, what's he laughing about? Did I? Well, yeah. Anyway, if that is happening to you right now, we apologize. But maybe it's just me.
So I quickly relaying back. You said in the beginning of this episode, electronics are fun for kids. Yeah, stick to DC when you're doing electronics for kids, not AC.
Yeah,
AC's not fun.
Bad.
It's bad. I mean, it's what is it? Shocking. Getting shocked is when, or getting electrocuted is when it crosses your heart. Getting shocked is just you can live past it. What's something like that? It's a funny saying where it's like.
I think just stick to low voltage. That's the guidance. I've done some stuff. I've tried some things with. Well, you know, do what you're comfortable with. And a lot of this, you have to use your judgment, but veer on the side of caution.
Yeah,
when unsure. So I want to get to my story about like close call. I unfortunately did not sustain injury from this, but I've talked a lot about how I don't like table saws, and one day maybe I'll overcome that fear, but afraid of table saws. The miter saw I have typically regarded as a pretty safe tool. The miter saw, however, is not so safe when you are cutting, and this goes back to hollow things, when you were cutting a hollow thing, as you cut through, it can do unexpected things. And what somehow ended up happening is something chipped as I was making the cut. And because it was hollow on the underside, like think of, it was almost as if I had taken, like as if a dado was cut on a small piece of material. It was a 4x4" 10x10 cm piece of material, and I'm holding it there with my hand. But the dado is cut and it's on the underside because the piece was, anyway, a lot of slots and cuts were made on the bottom, and I couldn't, and cutouts were made on the top, so I couldn't really support it super well. A piece of it chipped from underneath and like lifted up the entire part. It was basically like kickback on the miter saw. That was terrifying because my hand was really close to the blade because I was holding it there with my hand, and it was a small piece next to a stop block. So that's why I couldn't use a clamp, because I had a stop block on that same side, and I was just trimming it, really quick operations. It was a repetitive task because I had multiple pieces like this and I was batching it out, but one of them not good. And I mean, it sort of, it kicked up my, it still managed to give me some sort of like light scratches just from the speed and force of the wood.
Yeah.
But nothing, fortunately nothing touched the blade.
That's good.
And from that point on, I now respect miter saws a lot more. This probably happened about 2 years ago.
That's pretty funny.
If you watch my videos, you will now see that I almost never hold a piece by hand at the miter saw. It will be clamped one way or another, or like, you know, that 10 what's that, the $1 million stick or the $1 million finger.
It's funny, when FastCap sent me out a bunch of stuff, that was the number one thing I asked for, and I thought it was the most useless thing at first. It's awesome. Oh my god, it comes in so handy. You don't realize it till after. It's like you know, one of those welder hold down things. It's almost exactly the same. It's awesome for cutting small things. So if you ever want to, definitely get that.
Anyone have more stories about injuries that they want to share? Because I do have one more question.
I mean, I got a few. Dylan, I'm sure you got a few.
Just ask the next question.
Yeah, what's your question?
It's sort of like on a related topic, but today, like, given what you know now, what is the tool that you are most afraid of today?
Joiner. I hate joiners. Okay, it depends on the size. We only have like a 16 to 20 inch joint. It's huge. You know, like the one Frank Howarth has in his videos?
Oh my gosh.
We only have those at school, and that's the only one we use. It drives me nuts. And we don't have the difference between a spiral or a helical head and the straight blades. It's so much louder when they're straight blades. I hate it. So when I'm milling up really small stock, we're not allowed to do smaller than a foot. And I hate it. I don't use that. I try not to use it. It's so loud. There's so much vibration on it. It's so stupid when you're milling a piece that's 4 inches wide and you have a 12. It's way too big. It's obnoxious. I hate it. If I ever have a chance not to use it, I don't, or I get a classmate to use it. That's the one tool I hate. Everything else I'm pretty comfortable with, but that's the number one tool. What about you, Dylan?
I'm not really sure. I think I'm equally scared of a lot of tools, but I'm only scared of them when I'm doing operations that are risky. I have enough respect for a lot of them. I'm trying to think if there's one that's like particularly just terrible. The router doesn't terrify me in a scary sense, but I always feel like I'm going to mess something up with a router. Like I always feel like it's going to get away from me. Not necessarily hurt me, but I'm going to screw something up when I'm using a router. Let me think. What is a terrifying tool? I don't know. Let me think some more on it. Chris, what is your most terrifying tool?
Yeah,
I guess the table saw.
No, so I mean, I'm not counting that one because I don't use a table saw, so I don't actually experience this fear on an ongoing basis. When I'm watching videos on YouTube where people use table saws, yes, I'm sometimes a little, like, depending on how safe they appear, like Jimmy DeResta videos terrify me, for example.
You can push it through and walk away and come back to the piece while it's halfway through the blade and it's on.
No, so what scares me the most right now, and I use this, is a nail gun, pneumatic tools, because I haven't used a nail gun very much, but I did recently experience a situation where I shot a pin nailer into plywood and the nail shot, like, poked out the side in a completely unexpected place. Like, I was shooting straight and it, like, curved, twisted, and, like, poked out the side. And I mean, things like that, unpredictable things. Like, how do you see that coming, right? I don't know what it hit in the material. There was some a knot or a hard surface that deflected it, or like maybe it was my technique and I didn't shoot it incorrectly. But the nail gun, like, I was very hesitant. I usually stop myself when I feel like I'm buying an unsafe tool, but I really wanted a nail gun. And I tried it at a tool show, actually the woodworking show in Atlanta last year is when the first time trying a pneumatic nail gun. And it was so much fun and so satisfying to shoot the nail in, but at the same time, I'm kind of a little scared of how I might injure myself with this in the future. So that's the one for me.
I can tell you it doesn't hurt as bad as you think it would, because I've shot myself in the finger with a brad nailer for that same reason. The thing is you have to hold away from where you're shooting. I was holding two pieces together, shot a nail, poked out the side, and went straight into my finger. Stung pretty bad, but other than that, it was not terrible. I can imagine if you're using like a frame nailer,
that would hurt.
Yeah, and it depends if it hits soft tissue or worse.
Yeah,
but yeah, I mean, it's sort of like a needle.
I think honestly, in my shop, the thing I'm most hesitant to use, the thing I go to least amount of times I have to, is a table saw. I'm not super comfortable around my table saw. I've had encounters with my table saw that I haven't had with other table saws that just worry me a little bit. Like, for some reason, the fence sometimes cannot lock perfectly square, which could lead to binding, which is scary. I feel like if I had a really nice table saw, something like a saw stopper or a nicer cabinet saw that was new, I wouldn't be afraid of it at all. Or I should say, I always respect things. But probably that one thing that scares me a little bit is because I had to use one the other day, and I kind of thought about, like, this is kind of terrifying. Is like the little Dremel tools wheels, the real fragile cutoff wheels.
Yeah, those explode all the time.
And like, I had glasses on. Obviously, I always wear glasses, but I've had them hit me in the glasses. I've also had them hit me in the skin, and it didn't like do anything. So I don't know how like much risk there is there, but like those little things kind of terrify me. Angle grinder is intimidating.
Yeah,
but I'm pretty comfortable around an angle grinder. The cutoff wheels are more intimidating than the grinding wheels.
Yeah,
I had to this week, something that I was doing. Well, I guess this is in the future, but something I've had to do recently was actually my car has decided that it's needs all the common stuff fixed now. So it's like 235 or 240,000 miles on it. So I've recently replaced the radiator that went bad. I replaced the alternator. Now I just replaced the starter. And underneath the car, like laying underneath a car is terrifying. Doing anything under a car freaks me out. I'm not claustrophobic at all, but like just thinking about, luckily I didn't have to jack the car up, but like just thinking about like if the car somehow like rolled backwards or did anything, I don't know that I could work on cars every day. Like even if I worked underneath the lift, like what if the hydraulics gave out in one of those lifts, you know? That terrifies me. That would be really scary. You know how you have your phone in bed sometimes at night and like you go to fall asleep and it just hits you in the
drops.
face?
No, I haven't had it hit me in the face. I've done that where I lie on the side of my bed and I'll fall asleep with it in my hand, and sometimes it'll slide out of my hand and hit my floor and look incredibly loud, and I'll just jolt out of bed. That scares the living crap out of me.
How have you not had it hit you in the face? I thought it was like
I don't lie. I know.
Anyway,
I never lie down like this.
I don't think I'm falling. I think it just normally falls out. But like I was underneath the car and I had like a starter that weighs like 5 pounds up above my face, and I can only hold it with one hand because the other hand is like scrunched up, and I'm like trying to like hold the starter and then like reach like behind me and grab something to hand to this hand to like. That was no fun. So. Yeah, I think that's gonna do it, dudes. I think we've been on here for quite some time.
Awesome.
I think it's nap time.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and I'm exhausted.
Some of us are in the wrong time zone at the wrong time. So
it's funny. I have the earliest time for out of all of you guys. I'm still tired.
All right, yeah.
All right.
So you guys, y'all can find me at Wood Brew and any of the socials on YouTube, anything like that. Woodbrew.tv is website. We also have some new shirts available over there if you're interested, so you can check those guys out. We do a lot on Instagram, a lot of stories on Instagram, so if you're interested in seeing behind the scenes and more of our life, go over there and check that out. What about you, Chris?
you can find me on the website toolify.ca and also on YouTube under Toolify and the social medias as well. Justin.
You can find me on all social medias, Justin Levine. YouTube is Justin Levine, or you can make that. Feel free to message me anytime. I'll be happy to get back to you.
Sweet. Like to give a shout out.
I'd like to give a shout out.
Yeah.
We were already thinking it. See, we're both that thankful. Go ahead, Chris.
Nights.
Go ahead.
Okay. Shout out to our patrons Devin and Jerry. We really appreciate your support. Gonna do the clap every time.
Every time. I'll clap every time for you guys.
All right. Thank you guys for real. It means a lot. This show does cost a decent amount of money to keep running, and we appreciate all the support over there. So
sorry that this episode
and,
wasn't as structured as usual. Next episode should be better.
Yeah,
Yep.
And you guys are going to talk all about your Maker Faire experience next episode. That should be.
Oh yeah,
That should be
spending a week in San Francisco or in California, so be all over.
Good luck.
All right.
Can't wait. All right, guys, we'll catch you next week.
Yeah.
See ya.
See ya.
Bye, guys.